Well, thank you everyone for joining our Poll Everywhere training today. My name is Kaylee. I'm your customer success manager here at Poll Everywhere. And today I'm also joined by Matt, who's our chief technology officer. And he's going to actually walk you through some of the accessibility portion of our product as well. So today we're going to go through a couple of things. First, we'll go through an introduction to Poll Everywhere. So just, the activity types and features. We'll go through a couple of specifics and we'll actually see an activity creation live. And then we'll go through some accessibility for participants as well as staff use cases. And then for part 2 of our training, we'll go through how to engage students with different abilities. So we'll look at Poll Everywhere's accessibility work and our future plans, some 2024 updates, and then also some tools that we use to ensure accessibility. And then, of course, at the end, I'll save as much time as possible for a Q&A as well. But feel free to ask any questions throughout the training as well as they come up. All right. So just to get started here, I do have a quick activity for you all. If you want to go over to my response link here, which is pollev.com/Kaylee Clark. And then I wanted to ask you all, how much have you used Poll Everywhere at this point? And if you didn't catch that response link, it's still up here at the top. I see someone has responded, I could run this training session. I wonder who that could be. Okay, I've used it a few times. Nice. I'll give everyone a couple more seconds here. Okay, perfect. Well, it's good to see everyone's used Poll Everywhere a little bit, at least, it seems like. So we'll look at some things you may not be familiar with today, some you may be. But if there's anything specifically that you would like to learn a lot about, of course, just let me know. All right, let's move on here. So just as an introduction here to what Poll Everywhere is, of course, Poll Everywhere is a student and an audience engagement tool that allows you to spark conversations in real time. So not only will you be able to maintain your audience's attention, but you're also going to be able to conduct pulse checks, gather powerful insights over time through our reporting features, and you'll also be able to hear from everyone in the room, even those people who may not feel comfortable participating in a traditional setting. So definitely a lot of different things that you can do with Poll Everywhere and a lot of different ways that you can do it. So we have 8 different activity types here that you can see. We have our word cloud, our Q&A, and our open-ended question, which are all free response. So those are great for discussion starters or gathering, again, questions from your students. We have multiple choice and ranking. Those are great for pulse checks. And then we have our survey, which is kind of a combination of all of our activities. So you can kind of combine multiple activity types into one and send it out to your students as homework or survey students and other staff members. And then our competition is a great way to have a little bit more fun in the class or in your staff meetings. It's a great icebreaker or a great way to communicate policies and things like that, which we'll go through in a little bit here. And then at last here, we have our clickable image, which we'll go through some things with that as well. But basically that allows participants to click on an image on a specific spot on an image, and then you can kind of see those results on screen. So that's just a brief overview. We'll go into a little bit more detail here in a couple of minutes. But the last thing that I want to go through before we actually jump into Poll Everywhere itself here is some product highlights. So Again, as I mentioned, you can create those 8 activity types, but you're also able to present them via our website or Slideware. So we have integrations with PowerPoint, Google Slides, as well as Keynote. You can also share those activities with your team members, and then again, create reports. The nice thing about Poll Everywhere is that there's no hardware required, of course. So you can access it through your laptop or your smartphone, which makes it overall more accessible for everyone. So on that note, let's go ahead and jump into Poll Everywhere itself here. And let me share my screen. All right. So now that we're in Poll Everywhere itself, we're going to walk through a couple of things, but I think today we'll focus on activity creation and some different use cases. And then if there's any other questions on any other feature that we do have, just let me know and we can go through that here as well. So on the home page here, there is one thing that I'd like to point out before we move on to creating an activity. And that would be your activity response link here. So as you can see, this is where your participants will go to respond to most of your activities. So I would recommend taking a look at this here. I think it typically defaults to your full name and a couple of numbers. So you may want to shorten that a little bit just to make it easier to remember or to type into your browser for participants. So just a heads up there. And I did also want to point out that our support team's information is linked here on the left-hand side. So you can see you can call or email support here. And then you also have access to our knowledge base of articles if you click on this link. So all of these are great resources to know about if you have any questions or need any help with setting up your activities. All right. So on that note, let's go ahead and go down here to activities, which of course you can create an activity with this button, but just for the sake of today, we'll go to this activities tab here, which is right below the home page. All right. And once you're here, you'll see a couple of things. So you'll see your activated activity. This is going to tell you if you have an activity live on your response link, which since we just did one together, it's still here live on my response link. You'll see a pinned activity if you have one, which again, that's something that we'll go through in a moment here. And then as you scroll down, you'll see all of your folders and any other activities that you have here. I would definitely recommend folders, especially if you plan to use Poll Everywhere in any sort of slides, slide decks, presentations, things like that, just to keep it organized. Because if you have, 100 activities like this, and you need to come back in here and edit them or make changes to the settings at any point, it can get a little bit confusing. So just recommend creating folders first with this option, and then organizing your activities that way. All right. Awesome. So let's go ahead and create an activity together. So we'll go ahead and click create an activity, and we'll go through multiple choice first, just because this is probably the most common activity type to be used in general. And it's a great way to engage your audience on a day-to-day. So let's put in an example question here. Okay. And then we'll put in some answers as well. So we'll do spring, summer, fall, and then of course, as you need to add options, you click that option and enter that there. All right, so now that we have all of our answer choices typed in and ready to go, we can select a correct answer. Of course, this question doesn't really have a correct answer, but just as a heads up, if you want to set a correct answer, you'll just hit this check mark here, and you can select multiple correct answers as well. So if you'd like to do that, you can select more than one here as well. All right. Now, just a last note here before we go ahead and create this activity. Just as so you all are aware, there is an option here as well to upload an image instead of a text for your answer choice. So if you'd like to do that, you can click this option here to upload that and have that image show up here as well. I would recommend only using text or the image. So depending on what you'd like to do, I think the best visual is just the image by itself. And just as a heads up, we do have alt text options. So when you set up that image here, you can add those alt text options as well. All right, but let's go ahead and create this activity with just the text for now. So we'll go ahead and click create. All right, and then you can see that that activity was created. So now that it has been created and it's ready to present, there's a couple of things, of course, that we'll want to adjust before we go ahead and present this live, just to make sure that everything's configured to how we want it. So we'll start off with the visual settings here. Now you can see for multiple choice, we do have 3 different options here. We have a bar chart, a column chart, and then a donut chart as well. So depending on the question, you can adjust how those answers are going to show up. For this one, I'll go ahead and keep it at the bar chart. And then we do have some themes here as well, so you can select any of these themes. But you also do have the ability to adjust a color scheme as well. So if you want to set specific colors, for your text, your background, your secondary background, you can do that here as well. So some other things that I'd like to highlight, you can adjust the font. You can make this font size a little bit bigger. So if you are presenting in an in-person setting, where there may be issues with seeing the question from a farther distance, you can increase that font size there just to make it easier for everyone to see. One other thing that I like to point out is this background option. So you do have the ability here to add an image as your background if you'd like to. So I think this is a great way, especially if you're doing a presentation for maybe incoming students or new students. You can actually brand the activity directly for Elon University. So maybe you add an image that's your logo or a picture of a beautiful place on your campus. Something like that can be added here as the background, just to make it more customized to your university or your department. All right. And then the last thing I want to point out here, just for ease of use for you all, is this total results option. I always recommend turning this on. So this, you can just select this next to show on chart. And what that'll do is it gives you this little check mark here with a number next to it. So that way you can actually see, as the responses are coming in, how many responses here have shown up or been input so far. Because you can see here, the percentages here for multiple choice will show up. And then, of course, for other activities as well, there's not necessarily a count otherwise. So it makes it easier, especially if you're in, say, a presentation with 100 people. You're not going to want to guess as much on how many people have responded so far. So this is just a good gauge of how much more time you should give an activity. So just something to keep in mind there. All right. So that was all of the visual settings there. Now that we've adjusted the visual settings, we'll want to come over here to the configuration tab and adjust some of these things, depending on who's responding and how we want to identify them later. All right, so first thing here is going to be how people can respond. We do have compatibility with our website, as well as text messaging. We do have mobile apps as well. So that is up here with the website. I would always recommend responding via the website just because that is the better participant experience. So when you can, I would always recommend selecting the website here. But text messaging is available for those certain events where you may want it as well. Just a note, it isn't compatible with all of our activity types, so just make sure you check on that if you do need text messaging available for any certain event. All right. Next thing here is going to be audience restriction and identity. So by default, it's going to be selected here that everyone can participate with no restrictions. And basically what that means is that anyone who goes to your response link can respond to your activities. They won't need to log into an account or anything like that. They can input a screen name, which basically can identify them via, a first name, but they can always skip that and just be identified as a guest later on. So if there is a case where you need to identify these individuals later for any reason, then I would recommend that you restrict this to registered participants only. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to require that they log in ahead of time. So this might be beneficial for things when, maybe you want feedback from other staff in the department, feedback from specific students, things like that, where you need to identify them later. That way what happens is they'll log in with their participant account. So then you can actually see their name later on. So if you need to reach out to them for any reason or follow up on that feedback, things like that, you can do that there. Now, regardless of which option you have here, you can actually select completely anonymous as well, which will make, of course, everything completely anonymous. So you won't be able to see any information to identify any of the participants, including a name. There won't be any sort of guest name or anything like that. So it'll be completely anonymous on who responded. I would recommend, if you plan to use this setting, just to create a new activity to do it, because when you apply the setting, it will apply that to all past, present, and future responses. So if you've been reusing an activity that wasn't anonymous before, it'll make all of the past responses that you have archived completely anonymous, and you'll lose all of that identifying data. So if you needed to access it later, it would be gone. So I would recommend just using a new activity if you plan to use this as a completely anonymous poll. All right, but for this one, I'll go ahead and click everyone. And then we have our response settings here. So you can go through these, but these are really just things like how many times each person can respond, things like that. The one thing that I do want to highlight here right now is this participant results chart. I would recommend always turning this on. Basically what this does here is it's going to make this chart visible on the participant's device. So this is definitely going to be a setting to keep in mind for accessibility reasons. This will allow, again, participants' devices to pick up these responses. So if the participant is using a screen reader or anything like that, this is going to be the best way for them to actually be able to engage with the results. All right, and then the last thing that I want to show here for the settings is going to be the show activity title. Just so you know, the activity title is the question here. So I always recommend keeping that turned on. Again, this is going to, if you deactivate this, it's not going to show the question on participant devices. I don't recommend that for accessibility reasons most of the time. So I would recommend keeping that on so that participants' devices will have that question there. All right. And then last thing here, of course, is a timer. So if you need to turn the timer on, if you want to time box an activity, or maybe you're doing some sort of quiz or something like that, you can always turn this timer on. and adjust that timer here as well. I'll turn it off for now. But that is the basics of creating an activity and actually going through the settings and adjusting those. So I'm going to go ahead and present this now, and then we can go through any questions so far. Just as a note here before I present it, there are two options for presenting from the web. So the only difference between these two buttons is that present takes you into full screen mode, whereas activate will just activate it right here and keep you on this screen. So for now, I'll go ahead and click present here. And then this activity will now be live on my response link for you all to respond to. All right. Awesome. All right. Are there any questions that I can answer so far? Okay. Perfect. Awesome. I'm glad to see the majority is fall here, because I think fall is definitely becoming my favorite season too. Summer is a little too hot for me these days. All right, let's go ahead and exit the screen here. Perfect. And just before we move on, one last thing that I'd like to share with you all is this share option here. So if you would like to use Poll Everywhere asynchronously, sometimes that's not something that you think of immediately, but we do actually have the ability to share these activities asynchronously as well. You can click on the share option and then copy response link here. And then what that does is you can see it actually creates a direct link to that activity. So that way, you don't need to actually activate the activity in order for participants to respond, which is nice because if you're running a different presentation, but you still want to send this out to another group of individuals, you can do that at the same time and it won't affect your live presentation at all. So definitely something to keep in mind, but I think it's a great way to get feedback or questions, things like that from students or other staff asynchronously. All right. I see there is one question in the chat right now. So does a participant have to log in to participate? It took me a very long time to be able to answer the first question because I've never been on Poll Everywhere before. So you don't have to log in to participate. Again, if you have this option selected here where everyone is able to participate without any restrictions, it won't require that you log in to participate in the activity. If this is selected where you need to be registered, then you will need to be signed in. But otherwise, you're able to just use it by identifying yourself via a screen name there. All right. So let's go ahead and go back here. And just as a note, yeah, so for the first question, it wasn't restricted, but you may have gotten that warning that I just got, which basically said reminder to register for credit, which pops up for the default settings for my account. That shouldn't be enabled by default for you, so that shouldn't pop up for your students. But if you're curious to what your specific response link would look like, you can always go to maybe open an incognito window on your device and just go to your response link, and then you can see what that exactly would look like for your participants there, just to make sure everything is set up how you'd like it to. All right. So the next thing that I'd like to go through here is going to be staff use cases for Poll Everywhere. So I know that's something that a lot of you all would love to see is some examples of actually how to use Poll Everywhere for your work specifically. So here are some examples of some different things that you can use Poll Everywhere for. So some things like gathering group feedback, new staff onboarding, employee recognition, and then again, policy communication. So I'm going to go ahead and actually share some examples here. Let me pull these up. Here. All right. So here's an example of a multiple choice question. And this, of course, is being used to communicate a policy. So this can be great, as a reminder in a staff meeting, things like that, in order to communicate any new policies, policy changes, things like that. I think this is a great way to not only communicate those sort of things, but also to engage the participants in those meetings as well. Here's another example. And I think this is a really valuable one when it comes to employee recognition. So this is just an example question here of something that you could put in. But this is what words come to mind when you think about this employee and their contributions and achievements. So this is actually a word cloud activity here. So if we want to come in here, sorry about that. If we want to come in here and actually submit some responses here, we can actually see, let me pull up my response link so I can insert some responses here. So we can see those words start to pop up. And the more, of course, the more words here that are responded, the more that will show up here. The more times that a word is responded as well, the bigger that it will get here. So I think this is a great way to show appreciation for our staff members, for work anniversaries, birthdays, things like that. I think this is a great way to show appreciation for anyone in your department or outside of that as well. I think this is a nice way to show things. And great to see there's an emoji here as well. That's also something fun here that you can actually submit emojis here to word clouds as well. All right. Perfect. Another example here of a word cloud and a different way that it can be used. So this is one where it's gathering initial impressions, maybe for someone who's new to the university who hasn't worked there for too long, or for students who are newer to the university. You can also do something similar, but again, it's going to be a word cloud, and I think that it's a great way in a meeting with new staff or new students to kind of get initial thoughts. And again, it's a great way to get a general consensus from your audience. So if you'd like to see overall what the feelings are, this is definitely a great way to do that. All right. Here is another question here. So this one is going to be a Q&A. So this is actually going to allow participants to insert questions here, and you can actually upvote and downvote those as well. So again, this is something that would be great for a meeting with new staff, or maybe you send this out asynchronously to your staff members to gather questions from them ahead of a meeting. things like that. This can be really helpful in those cases, but it can also be helpful for engaging with students as well. So again, if you want to send out this Q&A asynchronously to students, if you want to gather questions ahead of a presentation, or even if you wanted to just have this as a place where students can actually go to submit questions to you, I think that's also a great way to actually to engage your students or other staff members. All right. Perfect. And then you can see this upvote and downvote here. So the more upvotes that an answer gets, the higher it'll go on that list. You can also archive these as you go through. I think that's a great feature of our Q&A, is that as you answer these questions, you can star this here as you're answering it, and then you can either move on to the next question or even archive or hide this response from the activity. So that way, as you go through the list, you can see all of the questions that you haven't answered yet. All right. And the last one here is actually a survey example. So again, I think this is a great way to engage not only students, but staff as well. Specifically in the work you do, I think it can be a great way to get feedback about things like how learning opportunities can be better supported. So this is an example of an open-ended activity. So basically, a student or a staff member could insert a free response here. And this is going to, of course, allow them to submit more than one word, as is a little different from the word cloud. So it's better for that more qualitative feedback that you may be looking for here. All right. Next question here is going to be an example of a multiple choice question being used as a scale here, just to kind of gauge overall how students are feeling. And then last one here is going to be a word cloud. So this is, again, I think a great way to get overall consensus as to what students or staff are feeling or what they need to feel most supported. So again, a great way for you to get that general consensus. And this is, of course, easier to compile. So you can see how many people responded a specific word, things like that, in comparison to the open-ended question. And let me just go to that survey here as well, so we can look at this here together. But surveys, of course, you can present them live, but I would typically recommend using that share link that I mentioned earlier, just to allow for a little bit more time for participants to respond here. So just a heads up there with that one. And as you can see here, the creation process for surveys looks a little bit different, just because there's multiple activities here listed. But you can always edit these questions later just by going in here, clicking on the question, and then clicking this edit option here to make changes to that question if you need to. All right. Awesome. Well, let me go ahead and switch back here. All right. Perfect. Well, I think that was pretty much the basics of things that you can do within Poll Everywhere as far as creating and presenting activities go. One thing that I, again, did want to emphasize here was making sure that your activities are accessible for participants. So I would, again, always recommend using the participants results chart when you're setting up your activities, because it will allow all participants to better engage with your results here. So you can do that, again, for your multiple choice activities, and make sure that these charts are available for participants there as well. All right. Awesome. Well, are there any questions on anything here so far? Any other questions I can answer at the moment? Okay, perfect. Well, in that case, then we'll go ahead and move into part 2 of our training here, which is engaging students with different abilities. And for this portion, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Matt to share with you all.
So I'm going to take you through some of the technical half of how we build our product with accessibility in mind, and how we think about engaging students with different abilities, and even just accessibility as it applies to everybody. I really like this mental model of accessibilities for everybody. You can be born without a left arm, you can have broken your left arm, and you can be holding a child in your left arm. And all three of those are different types of disability and how you use products. And so we want to build a product that's universally available to everybody in all of those circumstances. So I'm going to take you through some of the tools we use, and then I'm going to do a kind of nerve-wracking live demo walking you through how they work. So this year, we've just refreshed our VPAT, our voluntary product accessibility template. This is a tool we use to hold ourselves accountable to progress year over year in developing accessibility for Poll Everywhere. We do 2 of them every single year. We do one focused on the presenter experience, the person giving the presentation on stage or sharing the content, and then the participant experience, the people in the audience, the students in this case, because there are 2 pretty different workflows in our products. So we have both of those refreshed for 2024, and they'll be live on our website, polleverywhere.com/accessibility in the coming weeks. So those will right now go to the ones that were for the past year, but we're going to be uploading the new product accessibility templates for presenter and participant in the coming weeks. Show our roadmap, show what we've changed in the product to improve accessibility throughout the last year. Okay, so here are some tools we use when we're building the product. I don't know if y'all are familiar with any of them. Some of them are kind of technical and around software engineering or web application development. The first 2 are color contrast ones. We'll do them both at the design stage when our designers are looking in Figma to see, hey, does this have big enough contrast? Is the size difference between this text legible for people with low vision? The second set is a set of screen readers. So we use VoiceOver pretty heavily, and our QA team uses a product called NVDA when they test on Windows. All of our development happens on Mac machines, so VoiceOver is built in and is integrated into our development process, but only the QA team uses NVDA because it's on a Windows machine, and not all of our developers use Windows day to day. And the third set is automated scanning tools. We really like using a product from Axe called DevTools. This accessibility scanner called Wave, and a accessibility and performance audit from Google Chrome built into the Chrome browser called Lighthouse. And I'll take you through all of those in just a minute. And then here is a video showing our product using VoiceOver. This is given in a all-hands company meeting, and it's kind of to help people understand how VoiceOver works if you are unfamiliar with it, and to showcase some of the accessibility improvements we made in a core sorting workflow for activity management. So Kaylee, if you play that. Oh, actually, is your audio shared?
Let me reshare just to make sure.
Okay.
Visited link, sort by order. Sort by custom presentation order. When this column is selected and in ascending order, drag and drop activities to rearrange them. Sorting by custom presentation order in descending order. Sorting by custom presentation order in ascending order. Select, visited, link, sort by name. Sort activities and folders in alphabetical order. Sorting alphabetically in ascending order. Sorting alphabetically in descending order. Visited, link, sort by modified. Sort by the last time an activity or folder was edited. Includes name and content changes, not activation or new responses. Sorting by last modified in descending order. Sorting by last modified in ascending order. Visited, link, sort by count. Sort by the number of responses to an activity or the number of items in a folder. Sorting by number of responses in ascending order. Sorting by number of responses in descending order.
And so a large part of this is just people getting exposure to this. Not everybody uses VoiceOver day in, day out, and just understanding the level of detail presented and what the experience is like for somebody navigating only with a screen reader or their keyboard. So this is trying to build some empathy, build some understanding, and help people understand why it's important that we change these things and make the sorting more intuitive for screen readers.
Visited link.
Okay, and so now I'm going to do the live demo.